Hi, Doris. It's really great to be connected to you. And I'm really excited that we can dive into a deeper conversation between your work and some of what we're doing at Vitelle. And we've discussed ahead of this recording that we would really dive deeper into topics that are of relevance to women as they get a little bit older, which is what we're examining at Vitelle. So at Vitelle, we look at body and mind, and a lot of our expertise right now is probably more physical, and that's why we're really pleased that we'll learn some more from you on the mind front. And so I think when we surveyed women and we looked at what their fears and their challenges were going into this next stage of their life, but also the things they were looking forward to, the topics of aging and identity came up. I think we can all relate to the fact that in our 20s, youth is wasted on the young. There's a lot that we do that is questionable, but it's also really nice to be naive and just go through life in a relaxed way and really use, especially that decade between 20 and 30, to find our way in career and our social life, maybe establish relationships. So when we ask women specifically about this identity shift, when they get to 40 or older, I think we look at women from the age of about 36, but I find the 40th birthday is a big shift, and it's definitely something we pay attention to. I can say from personal experience that I feel like I was robbed of that birthday because it happened during the pandemic, which also plays into this topic today. So I didn't get to celebrate this identity shift as I hoped I would. I think I turned 38 and I knew I have 2 precious years where I would really celebrate and prepare myself for that, and then sort of enter this new decade as the woman I want to be between 40 and 50. So when I asked other women, they said similar things. They said they mourned their 20s and the energy they had, which is physical and mental. There were things like feeling a bit less resilient mentally in your 40s. I think we were less happy-go-lucky, jump on a plane tomorrow, do something, probably double check more what we've booked now. Some women said that they didn't really perceive 40 as the big one, but rather than they feared, quote unquote, 50 as a birthday that would really sort of render us obsolete. The feelings of being invisible have come up a lot, and that starts in your 40s and certainly in your 50s. Some women said they were really upset that they had a lack of hangovers at a time when they couldn't appreciate it. And so now in their 40s, you have one night that is a little more jovial and social, and you pay for it for not just a few hours, you pay for it for a few days. So I think my first question for you within this context is, does our identity change from a psychologist's point of view? And does it change beyond the societal norms of because society expects us to be eternally young?
Right. So there are a few things I want to say to that. First of all, completely hard agree, especially with the hangover things. I used to like to party myself, and I actually stopped drinking alcohol 5 years ago because specifically the hangovers, I could not deal with them anymore. They were ridiculous. So, but the things that I want to say, first of all, is just to acknowledge that absolutely, yes, that's a shift. And these are universal experiences that we have, and our individual identity and our personality kind of makes us experience them in particular ways. So we can talk about that a little bit. I want to get to mentioning a couple of psychological concepts that you mentioned. One of them is self-esteem, which I hope can, provide some understanding and just be taken as a reference as well. And then also I am going to offer some maybe shifts in mindset or different perspectives that we can take, because it doesn't all have to be suffering, right? Like there's like we said at the beginning, not everybody experiences this in the same ways. So especially the physical aspect of it and the energetic aspect of it, and the comparing to youth and the age that we might be now, there are different things. So maybe, first of all, just to make sure that we're on the same page, because again, psychologically speaking, the vocabulary we use, I want to make sure, because identity, ego, self, and personality, they're all slightly different concepts. So I've made some notes here just to make sure I share the right kind of things. And maybe it's helpful then if we start with some basic definitions. So our identity is a unique combination of physical and psychological characteristics, and it also comprises all the roles and affiliations that we have. You might also call it your sense of self. So what do I mean by that? It's who we are, it's how we see ourselves, and most importantly, it has a continuity to it. So for our sense of identity, it's important that we remember who we were as children, right? There's a line in your memory that you can pinpoint, at all times. These are autobiographical memories. This is who you were at different stages in your life. And so if you ask me, hey, Doris, who are you? I might say, my name is Doris. I'm German, but I live in Brooklyn. I'm a coach. I've been married for 16 years. So that's information about some of the roles and affiliations that I have that inform my sense of identity. It's not all of it, but it's part of it. The country I was born in, the fact that I'm an expat, the work that I do, the important relationships that I have in my life, all of those are markers that also help other people understand who I am. So now we have a shared understanding of who I might be. It's not the whole picture, and your interpretation of what it means to be an expat or what it means to be a coach might be completely different, but there's already a little bit of identity that I'm communicating with those concepts, right? And then also, I haven't told you, if somebody's just listening to this, I haven't told you about my ethnicity or my values or what I look like. So to physical and psychological characteristics, I might say I'm 5'9". I'd like to lose 10 pounds. I used to be blonde. My eyes are blue. I'm turning 48 in June, right? So that's the kind of information that tells you a little bit about what I look like. You can guess that I've enjoyed some inherent privilege growing up white in the Northern Hemisphere. And you also, with my age, you can tell I've probably been around the block a little bit, right? To put it that way. And if you are watching this as a video, then you've formed an opinion, very likely, about how I look as well. So since I'm a coach who works with personality type and the Jungian model, I might also share that I have ENFJ preferences. And that, if you know what that means, or if you don't, that means that connections are important to me. And I often get intuitive insights that allow me to be very much in tune with other people's feelings and emotions. So I'm quite empathetic as well. And there's a high desire that comes with that for everyone to live their best lives.
Can you just quickly tell us what the E, N, F, and J stand for each letter?
Of course. So the Jungian type model looks at how we are energized, how we process information, how we make decisions, and how we kind of organize our world. There are 4 dichotomies. The first is E or I, extraversion or introversion. The second is S or N, sensing or intuiting. That's how we process information, either with the 5 senses or more intuitively, kind of, pictures and patterns. And then how we make decisions can be a T or an F, stands for thinking or feeling. Thinking is objective logic, feeling is subjective logic. Those are both rational functions. So feeling is not emotion. Everybody has emotions, different thing. And then how we organize our world, that can be a J or a P, standing for judging or perceiving types. So judging types tend to like to plan things and check things off their list, and perceiving types tend to be more open to the process and more open to the experience.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
Good. I'm happy to actually put a handout together as well, where we can, I can just outline all of the concepts as well. That might be helpful for viewers who are not familiar with type. But in a nutshell, identity, how we think about ourselves, and by extension, how we judge ourselves and others, is heavily influenced by our biology, by our DNA, by our innate personality type, those, 8 kind of functions that we just highlighted, as well as the culture that we're in. And during midlife, a lot of these physical characteristics change, the roles and affiliations change, and all of those shifts obviously throw everyone into a bit of disarray. So what I was hoping to illustrate with that story about identity, of all the sharing, all the different aspects about who is Doris, identity is a super complex social construct. So what do I mean by that? Social, you get to decide who you are by yourself to a certain extent, because how you show up in the world gets feedback, and you get that feedback shapes you. Other people have opinion about how you show up in the world, what you look like, and that influences you. So coming back to the topic we were talking about, specifically for women like us who grew up and went through puberty in the 80s and 90s, where heroin chic and, skinny blonde models were all over the media. If that's what society tells you that what beauty looks like, then of course we will have a reaction to, all the lotions and potions and cosmetic surgery that is being sold to us, because all of those outside messages influence our sense of identity. How
I have a
does
question
land?
that ties in with that, because you said identity was both based on the just the social makeup, cultural background, age, and so on. And so the physical part, the question, so one was, does our identity change? Yes. And when you said that about us growing up at a certain time, I'm almost wondering if you have any opinion on this current generation growing up, if you think that they'll be different in 30 years, 20 years. But the other thing was like, then how do we come to terms with the part of our identity that shifts physically, especially in relation to society around us?
Right. So if you'll allow me to maybe just again to provide a little bit more context. So how is this identity formed, right? Where do we get it from? And the answer is that since it has this continuity aspect to it, our identity forms over time. So there are 2 sources of information basically that we tend to base or construct our self-concept on, our sense of identity, and that is self-knowledge and from others. So self-knowledge includes all the things that you would expect: introspection, journaling, reflecting. You mentioned earlier, people, in your 20s, you're a little bit more risk-taking, and so that's experimenting. All of that, you are literally getting to know yourself through all of these different things, right? How fast can you run? How much cake can you eat without throwing up? All those things. And then the self-knowledge, though, psychologically speaking, we tend to focus on the positive aspects, right? The stuff that we find out about ourselves that we don't like, that tends to get shoved into what Jung calls the shadow. Like, we don't necessarily have to look at that. So not all of the self-knowledge is terribly reliable or 100% accurate. But there is a lot of stuff that only you can know. For example, right now, I don't know how steady your heart is beating. I don't know if your right toe is itching. I don't know if you're hungry, right? Those are things that only you know. Same with your secrets and things that you keep to yourself, things that you might be ashamed of, stuff that you don't share. At the same time, others can tell you how they perceive you and how they view your behaviors, what tics they notice. Like in poker, there's this thing about your tell, right? Does your eyelid twitch whenever you're going to, so is your zip undone? All of those things. And when we are young, we tend to take on feedback in a different way. We tend to believe the stuff that other people tell us about ourselves. Often, many of us do. And so sometimes other people's opinions of us get baked into our sense of self and our sense of identity. And now in midlife, we have the opportunity to question those external messages. And are they actually true, or are they just something that somebody else put on us? So hopefully, getting older, we realize that other people's input is important, because it's feedback. It shines a light into our blind spots, right? It's literally sometimes stuff that we don't know and that we don't see. And other people's feedback is also usually through their lenses, through their personality types, through their biases, through their projections. So that piece of self-knowledge that we get from others is also not 100% reliable or accurate. So we have to, we get to a combination of that. And then combining these two information pieces, we get to the self-concept, how we think about ourselves, and that contains self-beliefs. So basically, that's the bucket that we pull from when somebody asks us, tell me about yourself, right? How are you? Like, what are your strengths? You might say, oh, I'm good in a crisis. Or what's your hobby? Oh, I can make anything grow. I love gardening, whatever that might be. And self-esteem is the part of that self-knowledge that we use to judge ourselves positively. So research suggests that, yes, we want to learn about ourselves objectively, right? Everybody loves a good self-assessment. But even more than that, we want to learn the things about ourselves that we think are good. We focus on the positive aspects, and that is called self-enhancement. And that happens when we compare ourselves to others and find ways to come out on top. And like I said, ignore the things that we tend to work on. So this is the concept. It's a normal thing. Everybody does it. It's social comparison theory. Obviously, there's a continuum where it can get pathological, and then you get into the realm of narcissism and stuff. But basically, self-enhancement is good for your mental health. And I promise I'm going to come back around to the question, because this healthy self-esteem signals your body that you belong. And that helps with many things, including existential dread. So back to your question, living in a world where 80% of the media shows you young and slim as sexy. And what if you're not 23? And what if you don't fit into a size, 2 or 4 or 6? You start feeling that you don't belong, and your self-esteem plummets. And then your sense of identity is shaken. And so is this the same for the people who grow up today? Or how are they going to be different to us? I'm going to say, if we're honest for a minute, there were women in midlife 20, 30 years ago when we were in our early 20s who were experiencing the same things. And we didn't necessarily pay attention to them when we were young either. So there is this, because identity is a social construct, it will change if society changes. And society and cultural values can only change if enough people move around to change them across all different age groups. And there are examples. We've seen this with the same-sex marriage situation. There's definitely been progress, right? The Me Too movement, all of that good stuff. And in terms of what we're talking about, the body positivity movement, like there is movement, there is progress happening. It's just that we still have a long way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've done a better job with this generation preparing them for puberty, in that they are now more familiar and aware of what their body is doing and what is a natural process. And it gives me a lot of hope that if we were able to do this for young women coming of age now, or in the last 5 to 10 years, that we can start this conversation that we're having right now for women who are our age now, but especially then influencing a better shift in that regard for them entering this stage. Because as you said, it will not come through the media. We thought the 90s were gone, now they're back.
Yeah, God knows why.
Yeah. And I like how you talked about how that then informs our self-identity. Would you go a bit deeper into self-esteem and tools for improving that?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, self-esteem is the positive judgment that, how highly we think of ourselves. And I want to say, in general, high self-esteem is great because it has been linked to, making people more resilient to stress and depression. But if it's too high, it's also been linked to risky behaviors, right? And then when you feel threatened, if somebody with an artificial kind of high self-esteem is threatened, then they tend to be aggressive as well. So we don't want that. And getting the levels right is important. And the main thing, or the key thing here, again, according to psychological research, is that you disconnect your sense of self-esteem from external sources.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? And this is where we get into the tips. If you're not going to get off of social media, which, let's be realistic, it's probably here to stay, are you following accounts that will allow you to use self-enhancing mechanisms in a realistic and supportive way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you following people who represent your own age group, your own generation, people, like real people who look like you and who sound like you, not celebrities with social media management and full-time stylists? That would be my first thing. And these are no secrets. I know, like, we're not reinventing the wheel here, but it's really, I think there's something there. And then also I'd like to say, do you have examples in your life of people who have embraced aging, who are empowered by it? And yes, we all like to have a bit of a moan, and that's absolutely valid and necessary. I'm the first in line. But we're also not dead yet. And, there's a lot of life still to be lived. So if you don't have an optimistic role model in your life, can you be that optimistic person for yourself and for others? And like, what would it take for you to decide to become one and to embrace this? Because this would allow self-confidence to kick in, and self-esteem is the positive judgment that we have. Self-confidence is the trust that we have in ourselves, that we are able to deal with whatever life throws at us. And self-compassion, cutting yourself some slack and realizing, okay, it's not just me. We always like to think of ourselves as unique, and oh my God, I'm the only one who's having this issue and nobody understands me. No, dear, sorry. Everybody, a lot of people are going through this, and you could be really helpful to others as well if, like you said earlier, if you speak out about it. Because I think a lot of the stuff that is happening right now that people are insecure about is because there are not yet quite enough role models out there saying, no, this is normal. This is what happens when we're in our 40s and 50s. And it's okay. We don't have to disappear silently into the night. We can still wear bold colors and do all the things, right? So we need more midlife voices on the scene. And if yours can be one of them, just sharing your experience and adding to the pool of people on the social internets, that will help, generations that are coming up now as well.
Yeah, I really like that. In true midlife fashion, I just had a thought about what to ask you next and then forgot.
Welcome to my world. Well, maybe okay. I have another tip. Maybe it'll come back to you, because so we've talked about the complexity of your identity, right?
Yeah.
And again, for some people, the whole physical aspect is more important than others. But if you used to get a big portion of your self-esteem from the way you looked, can you maybe also now look at those other roles or affiliations or other aspects of your identity that also make up who you are, and, put them center stage?
That's great. Yes.
Because we have a lot of options. And my whole point is, I invite you to think of yourself as a lovely, multifaceted, dynamic, changing being with lots of things to offer to the world. And so just an invitation to see how you can maybe shift a perspective or change that frame, or,
Yeah, it's come back. So on the topic of self-compassion, because we, again, through Vitelle, we've surveyed a lot of women, and you talked about the many things, our many roles, and we call it just the many hats that you wear. So women are often doers, and especially in this age frame, because there's really no other way. It's usually when we ascend professionally, if we chose to have family, then we'd have to try and find that re-ascension, which is a topic of a different video. But it's self-compassion as a word is very kumbaya. It's definitely perceived as talking to yourself in a sweet voice. And how, for women who are doers, how do we reframe that? How do we make it something that feels actionable, what is even a way to maybe measure that when we're doing better, so that we don't just feel like we have to stand in front of the mirror and do self-affirmations. Like there's a place for them, but I think that is sometimes a bit uncomfortable.
Right. And this is where I'm probably not going to, say both of us are German. So yes, definitely
Yes,
the pragmatic German nature is in there. And there are so many different ways to skin the cat. So my question for somebody who thinks, oh, all that is woo-woo nonsense. Well, actually, there's also scientific research that suggests strongly that affirmations and, again, thinking positively of yourself works. And I think a lot of people probably have heard of Dr. Brené Brown now. You can't scold yourself into feeling better, right? You can't shame yourself into doing better. So when I heard that for the first time, that made a lot of sense, because where I'm from, the feedback sandwich, where, in America, you get the good thing and then the stuff you need to work on, and then a good thing again, like the fluffy bits, and the meat is in the middle. We're used to the meat. We're not used to the fluffy bits, but the fluffy bits actually make the stuff in the middle a lot more palatable. So I have embraced that way now as well, because we don't need to, the world is hard enough. We don't need to beat down on ourselves on top of it. So if you feel like this is all too kumbaya, my question would be, who are you trying to please right now? Because it's probably not in your best interest. And like you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, I think is a phrase that comes to mind there. So my question, for someone who says, oh, this is all too woo-woo, would be, and without getting too much into the psychodynamics of it, but there is an inner child in you that likes to play. And when was the last time you let her out? Because, she's having fun. You have to have balance in life. And actually, maybe that brings us back nicely to the Jungian model, because if you're only ever one thing, if you're always organized, always punctual, always reliable, always the person who picks up everybody's things that fall through, you have to balance it out with time for yourself and reading a book and self-care, because as sorry as I am to admit it, I'm loath to admit that we are human and we have needs and we are not machines, and we cannot function at 100% all the time. And that's when all the fluffy stuff with you can only pour from a full cup comes out again. Again, these are, I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. But believe me when I say that thing with the oxygen mask is true. Like, you really have to take care of yourself in whatever way works for you, right? Like, I'm not even judging. If you want to never hear of an affirmation, if you want to run for half an hour and then go do the job, whatever works for you, if that's your personality type, go on and do that. But make sure that you know what is actually yours and what your soul needs. Because all of those roles that you were describing, mother, VP of sales, mentor, whatever it is, all the different hats you wear, those roles come with expectations. And my invitation and, the work that I do with my clients is we take some space to question, is this actually my idea of who I should be? Or has this been put on me by my parents, my partner, what I think society wants me to be?
No, I like that. I like you bringing us back to the notion of self-care, which is also often perceived as a bit, soft. Like we call it self-care or wellness, but really everything we recommend that is more physical is evidence-based, and we also just refer to them as tools. I think we've found that, personalization is so important, which is what you do. we do that as well. So if somebody has a preference for a very melodic, calm, seated or even lying down meditation, this is something that we recommend. And then the other option would be listening to brown noise while typing. Or if somebody wants to get more active, then we recommend things like breath work. And ultimately, again, all in that pursuit of filling that cup up again. I think we're generally trying to keep these videos to a palatable format. So I don't have any other questions, but if you wanted to add anything else on personality types in relation to this, I think that would be great.
Thank you, first of all, for this opportunity. I'm so glad we met. I'm glad I'm meeting some of the people in your audience as well. And I would like to invite everyone to come to my website and book a free curiosity convo with me. I want to have 100 of these conversations this year. So literally, you know, half an hour, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and then you get to ask me all the questions that you want. And I just want to leave everyone with this, that you are beautifully made. Your identity has many different facets. You are not just this one thing. You are meant to change. All of that is good. Realize that a lot of your doubts are based on cultural values. So whoever you grew up with, and all of that is a part of you, but you get to question and unlearn at this stage in your life, if that is still true for you or not, or if you want to live a different script. And then if you don't have examples of people that you might want to embody, see if you can be that example for yourself and for others. Most of all, that self-compassion piece is really important.
Yeah, that sounds great. From a German who has lived along the lines of das Leben ist kein Ponyhof. Life isn't a fun
picnic,
ride.
no picnic.
Yeah. No picnic.
Yeah.
I think we could all embrace a little bit less pragmatism.
Exactly.
Yeah, so thank you. And we will be sharing your message. I mean, this is very much reciprocal because we're learning a lot from you. And yeah, I can't wait for our next conversation.
Looking forward to it already.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.